Welcome to this week's episode where we are talking about the heat. Yes and no, not that kind of heat you get from a spicy curry, but the kind of heat that has been smashing and breaking records and making everyone wonder if someone around the world just accidentally cranked Earth's thermostat up to heat unbearable. You see, my friends, in just 2024 alone, a staggering 15 national temperatures records have been broken, with heat so relentless it makes you question if we are living in the worldwide zone experiment. Take, for example, from Florida to the far east in China, record-shattering temperature have had folks sweating and breaking out personal fans that should probably be classified as home appliance at this point. And this heat wave isn't just something we are imagining. It is history in the making and as well sweating. And if that is not enough, let us just put in there a few typhoons, hurricanes and cyclones for a little bit good measure. For example, in the oceans, storms nowadays are getting bolder, faster, and, well, let us just say they are causing so much serious havoc, and it's just a disaster. Take Typhoon Cannon, for example, a storm that parked over Japan, unleashing so much rain that it could have filled a year's worth of swimming pools. Meanwhile, Cyclone Flood in the Indian Ocean holds the crown of one of the longest-lived cyclones, spiraling through the waters like it is on an extended holiday, except it's that kind of holiday that leaves destruction in its wake. Now, my friend, these mega storms are getting stronger, faster, and even more frequent. Thanks goes to the warming world. Fascinating, definitely. Terrifying, absolutely. And the planet seems to be just saying, you think that's bad? Hold my barometer. Now, this week, a lot have been going on. I want you guys to join me as we unpack the chaos of climate change, from the record of heat to the supercharged storms. I would like to take this genuine opportunity to welcome a friend of mine who is my co-host in terms of climate issues and something like that. Adit, how are you?
I'm doing really good, Simon. Thanks for having me.
Are you enjoying, right?
Yes, it's a beautiful day out there. So, yeah.
From the bottom of my heart, I would like to say happy belated Diwali festival was yesterday and you did not invited me.
Oh,
but that's fine. I hope everything went well.
Yeah, it did go well. It was happy Diwali to you as well.
Oh,
it was some good festivities at the university.
If someone, let's say, don't understand the culture, if you can give us a little bit of a hint, what is Diwali? What is Diwali?
So Diwali is a festival of light in India.
Light.
Yes.
Yes, and that's why there are so many colors.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like we call them diyas. They're essentially like pots where you have oil and a little incense where you just burn the clay pots, and those signify essentially a win of good over evil.
Oh.
And it has a lot of mythological significance in Indian history. And it's essentially the win of good over evil, and a story, and it's a celebration of that win in our Indian culture.
No, I think I pronounced it wrong. Is it Diwali or Diwali?
It's Diwali. You're pronouncing it correct.
But it's a W. Based on my accent, W is just used to wa.
Yeah.
And that's why the pronunciation looks a little bit. So I'll try to be more like that. So happy Diwali, happy belated Diwali festival to all my Indian friends. And I hope it was amazing festival around the world. Speaking of what's going on right now, the world is going crazy right now with all the climate stuff and everything. You told me there are so many things that you come across and see a lot of stuff, and you just read a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
And the good thing is actually you're a PhD researcher at the University of Melbourne School of Geography, Earth and Atmospheric Science. You focus in climate extremes. Can you correct me on that one?
Yes, I'm focusing on climate extremes and climate change and what what is in store for us after we achieve net zero emissions in the future.
Now, I think we need to talk about that one later. But I just want to give you time. Tell us what has been happening in the worldwide right now.
It's been a crazy 2 years. Let's just say the least. Well, it's been crazy for the past 40 years, if I am to be true. For example, like we have known about climate change for a long time, and the planet has been warming at an unprecedented rate. But the signals of climate change are now starting to occur in different parts of the world, and we can see the impacts very clearly.
Okay.
Especially in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024 have been unprecedented in terms of the record-breaking heat extremes or extreme flooding events that have taken place in different parts of the world.
How many records have you broken this, at least the past 5 years?
So this is interesting. If you take from the month starting from June 2023 to August 2024, these have been 15 consecutive months of record global heat. So these have been the warmest months on record. And we have been breaking those temperature records month after month after month consecutively for 15 months.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
No, and this is just... lots of scientists are still debating as to why these past 15 months have been so warm. And it's a lot to do with, of course, global warming, but there are other factors as well. But it's one thing is clear, that without global warming, this thing would not have been possible. And this warming is showing up in other parts of our planet. The Arctic and Antarctic sea ice are at a minimum. They have been the lowest, second lowest they have ever been on record, the sea ice extent in the Arctic and Antarctic. So this warming is also accelerating changes in terms of Antarctic and Arctic sea ice melt, which could lead to global sea level rise in the future. And we are seeing those as well, these impacts as well.
And there are so many things going on right now. For example, Taiwan expected to... There is a typhoon that's going on right now in Taiwan.
Yes, Typhoon Kongray. So that's that just made landfall. I was watching the news this morning, and so far they've already been in the news. There are already some estimates of the number of people that have lost their lives and the infrastructural damage that have taken place because of landfall that happened earlier, just a few hours ago, if I'm not wrong. And not just that, but there are other consecutive heat extremes going on in other parts of the world, in Europe, in Spain. There's an ongoing flash flooding event that's happening right now.
Is it caused by rainfall or?
It's caused by rainfall, and climate scientists are still working on how much climate change has made this event worse. But what is clear is this is unprecedented in the sense that in Valencia, there are some rain gauges that have received rainfall worth of 1 year or annual amounts of rainfall in just a few hours, 2 to 3 hours.
That doesn't sound good.
No. And I think already there are estimates of 155 people that have lost their lives so far. And lots of people are still missing. And there's I'm just seeing some pictures that have come up on Twitter and other parts of social media. And they are horrifying, to say the least. So these events are happening more frequently and with more intensity, and we can see those signals of climate change now starting to emerge that scientists have been talking about for decades in terms of extremes and the intensity of extremes and the frequency of extremes.
We've seen something happen in the US, and I mean, they said one of the biggest storm in the past 100 years, if I'm correct.
Well, so one of what happened in the US on the southeast coast was that they got hit back to back by two very intense hurricanes, category 4, category 5 hurricanes, Hurricane Helena and Hurricane Milton. And this happened in the span of a week or two. So back to back being hit by intense hurricanes is tremendously damaging. So this is another aspect of climate change. Climate change not only increases the intensity and frequency of extremes, but it also causes compound extremes. So extremes happening back to back, one flooding event followed by another flooding event, an extreme heat wave followed by extreme rainfall. So these types of compound extremes are also likely to increase. And this is a very early stages of research. This is a very emerging area of research in climate science, compound extremes. There are people in our school and other parts of the university that are working on it. So this is another dangerous thing, and that's what happened in the US, and it caused a lot of damage. Again, infrastructural damage, lots of economic loss.
It is, and you know what is so scary? It is reached to the point that you can see the developed countries on how much they are struggling. The distraction of infrastructures, economic and everything, it is a lot. And then you ask yourself a question: if this same category, storm, typhoon, hurricane happens in a developing countries, what impact it would have made? How much distraction it would cause in that particular region or country or state or something like that? Because these countries right now, if there's something that I can say, it is there is the war in terms of development. We are struggling with net zero. The concept of, okay, let us reduce the amount of carbon dioxide, but we reduce the emission. Let us reduce the emissions. But the way the situation going on right now, it is just like, it's more political, because most developing countries think like, okay, developed countries, they have given us these policies and suggestions for the purpose of just make us continue to be poor.
Right.
Does that make sense? We want to do whatever it takes to be more developed at any cost.
Right.
Do you get the point?
Yeah.
And while most developed countries be like, guys, we've been there. And trust me, we are struggling in here. And if this situation can happen to you, it's going to be even more worse, because most of statistics say is like, in a future years, like past maybe 100 years from now onward, a large number of people will be living, let's say for example, in Africa.
Right.
So it will be a more populated region. And if you don't take good measure to ensure education, infrastructures, but mostly reducing all this kind of stuff, more just to put the cities more into sustainable perspective, it would lead more disaster in there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That's a good point that you bring up. And I completely agree with you in that the fact that there's this geopolitical undercurrent where you want a cleaner and sustainable way of developing, but the developed countries already developed in an unsustainable way, and now they expect the developing countries to develop in a sustainable way, which has an undertone of a bit of hypocrisy, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think what I can say is that there are measures that are coming up in terms of a loss and damage fund that was introduced a few years ago, where the developed countries need to bear and pay up to ensure that the developing countries can now develop in a sustainable and also clean energy way, but in a way in such that developing countries now invest in transitioning to cleaner energy. And while this is a interesting concept of loss and damage, where they pool up a large amount of money to help the developing countries to reach that goal of being developed, it's an interesting concept on paper and very hard to implement. And it's not.
Last time I had a conversation with Rob, and it was an amazing one. And we were just discussing about shipping emissions and everything, and he was just making the point. And I think this point we need to be very careful with this matter. He said that most of the investment that we're making around the world right now, still there is the whole loophole along the way. For example, we're expecting to reach net zero emission, right? Changing most of what we are doing, for example, adapting use of electric cars and all that kind of stuff. But we can say this can be a little bit more political. For example, I said last time, and I'll repeat it again, most people take good care to look at the product. Cars emit more. Okay, let us change the car. In terms of, instead of using fossil fuel, let us use electric car.
Right.
But the car is the product. There is the process that makes the product.
Right.
And that process still emit and produce so much carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And another thing that Rob makes the point was that's like, the car is not the final product. The final product is when the car is outdated and not needed anymore. So it goes into trash.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I think I agree with a lot of what you said and Rob's points. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, when you transition to a cleaner source like transportation, like electric cars, a lot of people make this argument that electric cars also run on electricity, which produces carbon. And then it's an expensive transition to make. And there have been already economic studies that have been done that if you transition to electric cars, the initial overhead cost may be very high. But on the long run, over the entire lifetime that the car operates, the economic cost is much lower. And the amount of damage you cause to the environment is also much lower. And the reason is because when you transition to an electric car, the amount of fossil fuels that you will be burning is much lower than what would have been the case if you were driving, say, a diesel or petrol car. That's one thing. And the second thing is our entire energy infrastructure will transition eventually to cleaner energy. So the electric car which you're now buying, you will be charging it using cleaner energy in 5 or 10 years down the line.
Let's make it even 20.
Maybe even 20. But for many parts of the world, yes.
Yeah, it is. And speaking of that, actually, let us give at least a round of applause to UK. UK has shut down his last, coal mine, something like that?
Absolutely. So this is one of the good news. We talk a lot about accelerating warming and accelerating climate extremes. But good things are also accelerating. Our transition to a clean energy future is also accelerating. UK just shut down its last coal burning plant after years of burning fossil fuels. And now, mind you, this is the last coal burning plant. So they're still burning other forms of greenhouse gases. But this is a huge step. It's a big developing nation transitioning.
Yeah, of course, because if you can take a look with what happened, especially, I think UK experienced worse of what coal industry has brought to the country. For example, back in the 19th century and 20th century, something like that, UK produced, it was the largest industrial factory around the world, right? Yeah. But back in the days, right? Now, during the time, there's something happened in 1952. It's called the Great London Smog.
Ah, yeah.
You remember that one?
Yes.
So only just a single night, the tragedy that happened consumed a life of 4,000 people in just 4 days. You see, so hearing the news, like they have been shutting down these factories, especially the one that produce using coal, it is actually a big step. And if you can take a look, they had policies to reduce the consumption of coal since 1950s. So it is something that we can say, okay, we are getting somewhere, and it does help. But speaking of climate change and all that kind of stuff, that is the question I want to ask, and there's something that getting into my mind around the world. States has been impacted back to back, we've said, with different hurricanes, right?
Yeah.
Right now there is something going on in Taiwan and in other countries around the world. But the question is the frequency of this event increasing or decreasing? And what about the intensity of these events?
Right. I think one thing where the science is clear is that the intensity of these short duration storms, like tropical storms, tropical cyclones, they are increasing undoubtedly, and we have physical basis for making that claim. And our observations show that as well. There have been more intense category 4, category 5 tropical storms, tropical cyclones, hurricanes that have been taking place in the past few years that we couldn't even have imagined decades ago. In terms of frequency, the signal is less clear. There are some ocean basins where the frequency has increased, for instance, perhaps in the North Atlantic, but where the hurricanes in the US happen. But there are some other ocean basins, like the North Pacific, where the signal is not that clear. And so it's a bit hard to do a frequency analysis because these events are not that frequent, and they haven't happened that frequently before. These are very intense events that don't occur that frequently. So the sample size or the number of events to do any type of statistics is very small. So it's hard to give a solid conclusion in terms of frequency. But in terms of intensity, we have a physical basis, a physical approach that we can use to make certain calculations to analyze that sort of increase in intensity.
That sounds good. We're using a little bit of a technical terms in here. Let's just make it a little bit simple for people who are not in the field.
Yeah.
The question, if we always, once we're talking about typhoons, hurricanes, and what is that? Cyclones, right? We often refer them with categories, right?
Yes.
Category 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Why do we have to use numbers, and what does this number means in terms of the categories?
So a category, putting a number to a cyclone is an easier way of saying how damaging the cyclone is going to be. Generally, the higher the number, the more damaging the cyclone or tropical storm is. And these numbers are essentially a representation of how much rainfall and how much wind that type of hurricane or cyclone brings to a region. The speed of winds associated with that cyclone.
And if someone, so we are talking about the intensity here. We are talking about how the strength of this of the storm, because storm is the combination of a lot of weather condition packed up in just one package.
Yeah.
Like the river right now, it's coming. You have a wind. You have it can be cold. It can be rain and thunders. It can be a lot.
Right.
So we put categories into numbers that says this is a scale. This is the intensity on how much strong it can be. If I'm right.
Yeah.
Another thing is, there's a simple question that someone asked along the way. Why do you use different names? Why in certain locations they are called hurricanes? Why in certain locations they are called cyclones? And why in other locations they are called typhoons?
I think I don't have from the top of my head, I can't give you a definitive answer for that. I think I've read about this somewhere, but I can't seem to remember. But I think it's to do with the way the terminologies have been developed in those regions.
Oh, the location as well.
Yeah, or the location as well. Typically, we use cyclones for Asia and Oceania regions, typhoons in East Asia, and hurricanes in the North Atlantic. So the basin in which these tropical storms are occurring, the name could be different.
That's interesting. You see, I usually just used to listen to the news, and I'm from, tropical region. I'm from Tanzania. It is hot throughout the year, especially from where I came from. So oftentimes you can just hear, okay, there is Katrina, there is blah blah blah, and it'd be like, okay, I wish to experience something like that. And so I wish to experience something like that. I wish to experience how typhoon really is, or hurricane, or whatever it is that it happens. I wish to. Well, when I was in Taiwan, I had a first experience, and it was just getting like a news, the alert and everything, and I was like, wow. So how is this going to be? And I remember the professor be like, just get the food, make sure you have enough store inside, and don't go outside.
Okay.
And I was like, you say what? So we cannot experience this thing outside. We want to see how strong the wind can be. And I was just relaxing. Someone just posted a video in our group chat, and the group is so scooter flying. The wind was so strong that he just picked the scooter and smashed it around a couple yards away. And I was like, that's not cool. No. That's a scooter. It's too heavy than I. And what if that was the experience? But if there is one kind of weather that I enjoy, it's rainfall.
Oh, okay.
I really enjoy rainfall because the sound makes me sleepy all day long. I really love it. But it was so terrifying, the thunders and everything. And now my thought was like, okay, I've watched it in some news or movies sometimes. Sometimes you can see the wind so strong, it can uproof, the roof. And I was like, oh, this is going to be it's going to be difficult for me to comprehend. So my wish came true, and it was disastrous.
Disastrous, yeah.
You're from India. You guys experience monsoon season and all that kind of stuff, and frequently most of the time especially in Asia. Have you ever experienced typhoon or any kind of storm?
No. Well, I haven't been lucky enough or unlucky enough to experience a tropical cyclone myself, but I have been in the vicinity of tropical cyclone. I have experienced some of the indirect effects of tropical cyclones. When I was doing my master's in India, I was in the East Coast, and that is where usually the most tropical cyclone impacts happen. And we have had a shutdown of our studies, and for 3 or 4 days we were asked to not leave because there was a tropical cyclone approaching, and there were lots of sustained winds and lots of rainfall. I have had my flights cancelled because of tropical cyclones, because I used to travel a lot from central India to eastern India, and that's where usually the flights get cancelled because of these impacts. So I have experienced the indirect impacts, and I actually don't want to be part of a tropical cyclone for sure.
Okay, that is something complex and complicated, but we wish that everything would be just fine. Everything would be just fine. So there is another thing that going on right now. Our ability to predict this thing.
Right.
Now, limitations to predict, climate events and everything. What are the current limitations that we have?
Well, the current limitations that we have is the fact that it's just difficult to predict these things with enough accuracy or with a longer lead time. So predicting them early enough so that people can evacuate. That's the issue that we have. Weather predictions have come a long way. Our ability to predict 3-day forecasts correctly or make 7-day forecasts correctly has increased immensely over the past decades. But when an event like this happens, which is so intense, our weather predictions still struggle because it's hard to catch these. But catch these types of very intense events, which are so rare. But our models, the models which we use for weather prediction, they're improving. And we are now able to pick up these types of events 3 or 4 days in advance, which is a really important step. I think as an example, Hurricane Milton is a really good example of very, very accurate weather prediction. They were able to predict the correct track of Hurricane Milton. So where it's going to move, where it's going to make landfall, where it's going to come in contact with the coastline of the United States. They were able to predict it down to the nearest 10-15 kilometers, I think. And that's very accurate. And that gives you a lot of confidence in the fact that we, with the improvements of our computers in the future and our ability to predict these things, we will be able to predict them with more accuracy and earlier than we do right now, maybe 5, 6 or 7 days. And that gives you enough time for people to evacuate these regions. And so I think I have a lot of hope in terms of where we are going with this. And development of early warning systems is coming into play more and more in the developed regions and also in some developing areas for these intense events.
Andrew published a new research paper. It's a new article that's available. And the title still just make me wonder. Just long story short, it's just like even if when we hit net zero, still the climate, the global warming will a little bit continue for a couple of years later. So it means the disaster will continue to happen. Now, I wish that we can have some time with Andrew King, maybe next week or something. I will try to talk to him if he'll be willing to come and talk to us about his new findings. I think it's something new and good.
Yes.
And very terrifying as well, because we have like a debate, the hope that, okay, let us reach net zero and then climate change will pause. The global warming will stop and everything, and things will go back to normal. But new findings emerge now and suggesting like, okay, the more we are waiting, the slower that we are going in terms of reaching net zero, the more disaster, the length of the period to receive more disaster is also increased.
Yes, absolutely. I think that study is first of its kind in many ways in trying to look at impacts even after we achieve net zero emissions. And what it details is that the more we delay emissions, net zero emissions and our targets in this century, the worse the impacts of climate change are going to be. And these impacts are going to sustain for centuries. Some parts of the world will continue to warm for centuries after we achieve net zero emissions. Which when I saw these results for the first time, I was shocked as well. And it's incredible that the Earth will adjust itself in a way to the damage that humans have caused in the past few decades, which is incredible.
If there is something that I wish that the time travel machine, I wish that we can have a time travel machine right now, so as we can go in the future and see what happened in the future. We are struggling right now with all this development and everything, hope for the better future, and yet we will not going to be in that future. Another generation will, just like those who lived here. Just like those who developed the first industrial, steam heat engine machines. They had a hope, like, okay, this is what can happen. It's gonna help us in terms of producing goods and everything. It will develop nations, make nations powerful, produce more industries and everything, and the wealthy will increase. That was our kind of hope they had. If they had a moment to travel to our future and see what many nations right now are struggling with the climate change based on a decision that they made, and if we have the same opportunity to go to the future and see what we are really doing right now, make the future look alike, I think we'll stop and pause for a moment and say, hold on now, we are struggling and focusing, chasing these mighty dollars, getting money and everything, and then at the end of the day, this is the disaster that we have created. We have created a monster. The cities might look beautiful, just like we saw in the movie. That's like the way we see in the movies. The city might be beautiful, amazing, skyscrapers, AI everywhere. You don't have to struggle with anything.
Right.
But I kind of have a feeling that we are going to lose something. We're going to lose our sense of touch with the Mother Nature, with the beauty of this environment. And even though we have different religion and faith and everything, but we all agreed on one thing. One of the most important things to be created before a humankind was environment. God created environment first, and then he put humans. The funny thing is, just like he created water, put fish, created the sky and put birds, created the soil and put trees, and after completed everything, he created us and put us in charge to take good care of this planet, so that the planet can take good care of us. The question is, what we're doing right now, are we on the right path? Who knows? This is Simon William and my co-host Adit. You were just listening. Guy has tell us. Adit, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's a really good note to end it on. But I would like to add that I am hopeful. I'm hopeful in the sense that, and there's a recent report by the International Energy Agency that came out saying that we are going to have a huge acceleration in our transition to solar and wind in this decade. And we could see solar becoming the biggest source of energy by 2030s and moving past fossil fuels. So it gives me hope. We are on that path to transition, to cleaner energy. The only question is how fast we are going to be, and if we can change these things. But
It's
I'm
a good thing how fast we are going to be. Special thanks goes to you. Thanks for the time. It is insightful and terrifying at the same time. This is Gaia's Tales. I am Simon with Adit, and I would like to say to you, have a beautiful weekend. It's going to be a little bit sunshine and a little bit of rainfall tomorrow, right? On Saturday. Yeah. So make sure you enjoy every moment of it. Until next time, we are signing out. Bye-bye.